So let me guess. You want to take a solo trip to Europe, but you're feeling super overwhelmed with all of the information that you're seeing online and has you feeling completely lost on where to start. I get it. I felt the same way when I started planning my own solo trip, where I traveled to 8 countries in 3 months. I spent months and months and months planning my trip and didn't even finish planning it until my trip was almost over. It was exhausting and I got so burnt out, which led to me having a pretty stressful trip. But since then, I've traveled to Europe by myself multiple times now, and I've put together 10 easy steps for beginners to simplify the planning process as much as possible. This is perfect for first time solo travelers. So let's dive in. Okay. So you've decided which continent you want to go to. Out of the 7, you've chosen Europe, which is a great choice, by the way. But now, how do you decide where in Europe to go? There's so many places to choose from, 44 countries to be exact. So I understand the struggle. Okay, so the very first step that you're going to take on this planning process, you guessed it, is choosing your destination. And I know when you think of Europe, it's like super tempting to try and see as much as you can and go to all these different places. But let me ask you this. Would you rather spend your trip racing from country to country, trying to pack in as much as possible in a short amount of time? Or would you actually like to soak in and enjoy everything that each place has to offer? Exactly. I know which one I would go with. So, depending on how long your trip is going to be, you're definitely going to be able to fit in more places without feeling rushed. I was able to hit up 8 countries and 13 different cities, but I was also gone for 12 weeks. So that's something to take into consideration. So these are the factors that I would consider when trying to choose a place. What kind of weather can you see yourself walking around in for extended periods of time? How much money do you want to spend? What's your budget like? Some countries are more expensive than others. For example, Western Europe is a lot more expensive than Eastern Europe. What kind of food do you want to have? Do you want to eat croissants in France? Do you want to eat paella in Barcelona? Do you want to eat spaghetti in Rome? These are the things that you need to think about. And what kind of experience do you want to have? Do you want to go hiking? Do you want to go skiing? Do you want to go to museums? Are you a history buff? What are the things that you enjoy? Do you want to be in nature? Are you more of a city person? You really got to think about these things because that'll help you narrow down your choices. And I know you're probably like, but Sue, I want to see everything and I want to go everywhere. It's so hard to choose. And you know what? You're going to have to choose because if not, you're going to be super burnt out and you're not even going to be able to enjoy your trip. This is how I would choose if I was going for the first time. I would write out a list of my top 10 places that I would want to go to. And then from that list, I would narrow it down to 5. And then from those 5, I would narrow it down to about 2 to 3 places. And those 2 to 3 cities can be different cities in different countries. They don't all have to be in the same place. Then I would add another 2 as maybes in case you're able to fit them in. Also, I'm going to put on the screen real quick what my ideal itinerary looked like before I ever actually went to Europe. And I want you to just see how insanely crazy this is and how unrealistic it was. This is an itinerary that I had put together before I had even ever traveled to Europe. As you can see, this looks insane. I wanted to see everything everywhere, and spending a day here, 2 days there, it's just exhausting and completely unrealistic. And you'd be rushing through all these places. This is a perfect example of trying to fit in too many places at once. Luckily, I didn't go on that trip. I don't think I would have been able to handle something like that. So just take that into consideration when you're putting this together. Okay, so this next step is definitely one that if you skip, I guarantee you won't be going anywhere. So the next step is to apply for or renew your passport. Imagine spending months and months and months planning your dream trip only to realize that your passport's expired 2 days before your flight's supposed to leave. Yeah, not fun. If you already have an existing passport, double check the expiration date. Your passport should have at least 6 months of validity remaining from the date of your entry or departure to or from the international destination. So what they're saying is that your passport needs to be valid for 6 months after your entry or departure date from the country that you're going to. And you can just renew these online. If you don't have a passport, apply for one now. Literally, you can do that today. If you're not sure what process you need to take in order to renew or apply for a passport, then you can visit this site, travel.state.gov, and that'll give you all the information that you need. I also highly recommend applying for global entry. It is a game changer. This allows you to skip through the customs line when you return to the US from an international location. And it includes TSA PreCheck. So whenever you're flying anywhere from the US, you get to stand in that TSA PreCheck line, which is usually so much faster than the regular security line. I typically don't spend more than 10 or 15 minutes in PreCheck, and that's on the longer side. So global Global entry is super easy to apply for, but the difficult part is getting an interview. So you can either use a site called ttpaappointments.com, which is what people use. They charge a fee, or you could just keep checking the appointment sites every day. People cancel all the time, so new appointments come up. You can take a look at other nearby cities. They're usually at airports, so I would just take a look to see where they have available appointments. Or if you already have an international trip booked and you're coming back into the US, you can actually do your interview at the customs office. So the interview takes 5 minutes, but they just want to make sure that you are who you say you are, verify, your identity, all that stuff. All right, moving on. So now we're going to talk about one of the most expensive parts of the trip, the flight. So one of the things that you want to start doing very, very early on in this process is to start researching flights. Do you know how much flights to Europe typically cost? Depending on when you're flying, it can easily be more than $1,000. That's a lot of money. So here's how you want to research. You want to use the Google Flights Explorer option, and you want to be flexible with your dates. You want to be flexible with your dates and your location. Okay, so another tool that I like to use is an app called Hopper. So I don't typically book my flights through Hopper, but I like to use it to track the prices. So with Hopper, you can set an alert for your dates and where you want to go, and it'll tell you when you should buy. Another good way to research flights is to see how much it'll cost to fly from different airports that are near you. And if you don't have any large international airports near you, I would fly to one from a smaller airport near you and then fly to Europe from that airport. Also, check flights into all different European cities, not just one. Let's say you want to go to London, but it's cheaper to fly into Paris. Fly into Paris and then just take the train to London. It's only like a 2.5 hour train ride. The biggest expense is literally just getting there. So you want to try and be as strategic as possible when researching and booking your flights. Also, the time of year you go will greatly influence how much you end up paying for a flight. If you go in the summer, it's going to be very expensive. If you go in the winter, it's going to be pretty cheap. So you got to think about what time of year you want to go. If you're only able to go during a certain time of the year, then try and be flexible with your dates. And like I said, look at different airports to fly out of and into. Okay, so speaking of flight costs, that leads us into our next step, which is setting a budget. So how much does it actually cost to take a trip to Europe? Well, there's so many factors that come into play when determining your budget. So first off, it's important to know that transportation and lodging is going to be the bulk of your money. That is where most of your spending is going to go. So if you can get a good deal on both of those things, you're in the clear. So here are things you want to be budgeting for: activities, food, an emergency fund, any bills that you're going to have to pay back home while you're away, and miscellaneous things like souvenirs and things like that. So this all depends on you, your lifestyle, what you like, what you don't like. There's a ton of free things to do, but if you want to go on all of these excursions, it's going to cost a lot more. If you're going to go out to eat all the time, it's going to cost more. When it comes to activities, there's so many free things you can do. You don't even really have to spend a lot of money to be able to see a place and enjoy everything it has to offer. And then when it comes to food, if I'm staying at an Airbnb, I'm going to get some groceries so I don't have to spend every single meal eating out. As much as I would love to, I just don't have the budget for that. So it's important to know what meals you want to eat out for. You got to make sure you have an emergency fund. I would say at least a couple $1,000 just in case, but it's really up to you. And then what bills do you have to pay back home? Do you have a car payment? Do you have a car insurance you have to pay? Health insurance, other things like that. Like those are all things to take into consideration when setting your budget. And then you want to have a little extra cushion for like miscellaneous things that come up. Like if you want to buy souvenirs, postcards, things for people back home. So things like that. Okay. So now you know where you're going and you have a pretty good idea of how much you're planning on spending. The next step is to plan your itinerary. So this is where you will create the order in which you'll visit different places, which things you want to do on which days. So here's what you want to consider when you're putting all this together. First off, you want to think about how long you want to stay in each place. How long are you able to take off work? Do you work remotely? So again, this is all really dependent on what you want to do, what you want to see. When I traveled abroad, I knew I wanted to spend 2 weeks in Paris. I knew I wanted to spend 2 weeks in Italy, and that's exactly what I did. But I also planned it out that way because I was working remotely full time. So in order for me to have been able to really experience everything that I wanted to do and see, I needed to give myself extra time. When you're traveling from one European city to another, it is so important to take into account the travel time. So for example, I flew from Barcelona to Paris. Even though it was less than a 2 hour flight, I spent the entire day traveling because I chose to use public transportation to get to and from the airport. And that takes a while. So I ended up spending the entire day traveling from one city to another. So that's something that you need to take into consideration, dedicating days that are just for travel. So if you're flying, I would dedicate one day for that. But if you're traveling by train, depending on where you're going, you might need a couple of days. If you're traveling to multiple cities in the same country, I would just recommend taking the train there. You could even take the train from country to country depending on where you are. For example, it was easier for me to take the train from Florence, Italy to Zurich, Switzerland without having to fly. And it only took me, I think, about maybe like 4 hours, which is nice because I didn't have to spend my whole entire day traveling. So if you're having an issue trying to figure out how to piece this all together, there's a really good site that I like to use called Rome to Rio, and that will help you figure out what the best route is based on the places that you want to go. Also, this video is not sponsored by any of these companies that I'm mentioning. I'm just telling you what they are because they've helped me a lot in the past. And the point of this whole channel is to educate you guys and give you guys all the information that I know so you guys can plan a really fun, successful trip. Also, if you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to like and subscribe. I come out with videos like this every single week. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, so now you have your itinerary mapped out. Now it is time to start booking accommodations. When you're doing this, you want to ask yourself a very important question. What's your top priority when choosing a place to stay? Is it location? Is it price? Is it comfort? Is it all of the above? These are all things that you should be thinking about when you're researching. Okay, so I know that we're trying to do Europe on a budget, right? Because it's expensive to travel. I totally get that. But at the same time, we want to look beyond the price tag of where we're staying because I'm telling you from experience, it's not worth it to book the cheapest accommodation possible. I think there's a few different important factors here when it comes to choosing a place to stay. You want to be comfortable. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, we're going to be out all day. Like, we're just sleeping there and showering and this and that, whatever. But that doesn't matter. I want to sleep in a nice, comfortable bed. I want to have a really nice, clean bathroom. Like, it all is part of the experience. And especially when you've been flying or traveling all day, you want to be at a place where you can just relax and feel comfortable. Not only that, you also don't want to be super far away from everything. A lot of the places that are cheap are far from the city center. It'll cost you more money or the same amount to book a location that is further away from the city center than it would be to book something that is more expensive and a lot closer to all the things that you want to be near. If you're staying somewhere far away, you are going to have to spend a lot of time and money just getting in and out of the city every single day. And that's going to eat up a lot of your precious time. And as you may or may not know, time is the most valuable non-renewable resource that we have. I think it's a lot easier to be a lot closer to the action because also after a long day, again, you want to be close to your place, right? You don't want to have to get on like an hour-long train ride to get home when you're exhausted. So you want to make sure you read the reviews, check the location, see what the refund policy is, and also what kind of vibe do you want? Do you want to be in a more local, like quiet area, or do you want to be like in the middle of all the action, right? At the end of the day, in my opinion, you cannot put a price on comfort. That is something I'm willing to spend more money on, especially as I'm getting older. When I was staying in Rome, I slept in the most uncomfortable bed I've ever slept in my entire life. And it's because I was trying to save money. And was it worth it? Absolutely not. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, so the next step in this planning process is to create a packing list. How many times have you gone on a trip and you packed something that you haven't worn in years, but you packed it just in case you were going to wear it and then never ended up wearing it? That's happened to me more times than I can count. The biggest mistake that travelers make, especially new travelers, is overpacking. So here's what I recommend. Bring only what you need. But you're probably like, but I need everything. You don't. If you don't already, try and build yourself a capsule wardrobe because this will allow you to very, very easily mix and match different pieces so you don't have to pack a ton of clothes. Because at the end of the day, what we're packing, like our outfits and stuff, like we want to be cute, right? But we also want it to be practical. Get you a girl who could do both. That's you. So you're going to just want to stick to the essentials. And depending on how long you're going for, you'll probably be able to do laundry where you're at. So that's something to consider as well. Think about what you actually use on a day-to-day basis and not something that you might end up using. And remember, you can always buy whatever you need when you're abroad. You're not going to like Antarctica, right? Where you won't be able to even find like toothpaste if you need it. I've never been to Antarctica, but I'm assuming that they don't have toothpaste there. I suggest sticking to a carry-on and a backpack and a purse, of course. And bring a purse that you can fit inside of your backpack because a lot of airlines will consider the backpack your personal item. And if you show up with 3 different things, it might be like, whoa, 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 what's going on here? You gotta condense. But yeah, just try and be smart with your packing because you don't want to overpack and then have to be lugging around a 50-pound suitcase from place to place. Like it will be annoying. And also when you make a packing list, it really helps ensure that 1, you're not forgetting anything, and 2, you're not overpacking. It's a really great stress-free way to stay organized and know that you'll have everything that you need. Okay, so now you've booked your flights and lodging, you've planned your itinerary, and you've created your packing list. You're probably thinking that you're pretty much set to go, right? But there's a few more crucial steps that we need to take that we cannot skip. Okay, the first one is to register your trip with the STEP program. Have you ever thought to yourself, what if something happens in a country and I need to get back home safely? This is where the STEP program comes in. So the STEP program, or the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, is really great because it keeps you up to date on anything that's going on in the country that you're traveling to that you should be aware of, especially when you're already there. So the STEP program provides you updates on safety conditions for things like natural disasters, political unrest, or a health emergency. If the government knows where you are and something happens in the country that you're in, they will work with you to help get you back home safely. So this provides a lot of peace of mind while you're traveling, because you know that if there's an emergency going on in the country that you're in, you're going to have a way to get back home. So speaking of staying protected, let's talk about one of those extra things that people tend to not think that they really need, when in fact it is absolutely critical. That's right. I'm talking about travel insurance. Have you ever thought of what would happen if you had a medical emergency abroad, or if you had to cancel your trip because you had a family emergency to attend to back home? Well, that's exactly what travel insurance is for. It protects you financially in the event that you experience some sort of emergency. Think about your trip as an investment, and having travel insurance is protecting that investment, so that if something happens, something goes wrong, and you need to cancel your trip, or your trip gets interrupted or anything like that, you'll be reimbursed by the travel insurance company if it's a covered event. So travel insurance usually covers things like medical emergencies, lost or delayed luggage, travel delays, and trip cancellation. So travel insurance is great. But my number one tip is to make sure you fully understand your policy. I used to work in travel insurance back when the pandemic hit, and I was responsible for explaining coverages to customers, which meant I had to tell a lot of people that they weren't getting their money back when COVID hit. But that's a story for another day. So you want to make sure you understand that policy inside and out. Call the insurance company, ask them all the questions you need to ask them to make sure you fully understand everything and you understand how to file a claim and what would make you ineligible to receive compensation for a certain event. They can't tell you anything for sure until you actually file a claim. We were taught to never tell anyone, yeah, you're definitely covered if this happens, because we don't know the situation, right? Even if it's something that I'm like, yeah, that should be covered, I can't tell you that. Only an adjuster can tell you that. Claims representative? I don't remember the name of the person who handles that stuff. You cannot imagine how many people we had to deny claims for simply because they didn't understand what the policy covered. There are very specific instances for each thing. So you want to make sure, hey, if this happens, is it likely that I'm going to be covered? Because then what's the point of having travel insurance? So just make sure you do your due diligence and that you feel good about purchasing the policy, and that you work with an insurance company that has really good customer service too. Because the last thing you want to be experiencing is having to deal with an emergency and having a hard time dealing with customer service when you're trying to file a claim. All right, we made it. We made it. The last and final step. If you're still here, drop a plane emoji in the comments. You're a real one. You're the real MVP. Thank you for sticking around. So this might seem like an obvious one, but I think it's worth mentioning anyway. And I kind of talked about it a little bit before, but it is very important to have an emergency plan in place. What does this mean? So you got your emergency fund, right? You have your couple $1,000s, you're feeling good. But what happens if your passport gets stolen? What happens if your wallet gets stolen and you have no ID? What happens if your phone gets stolen? What happens if your phone dies and you don't know how to get back to your hotel or Airbnb? You got to have a plan for all these things, because there are things that might happen. For example, make sure you always have a fully charged battery pack to charge your phone and a USB cord if you need one. Make copies of all of your important documents, your travel insurance, your license, your passport, whatever you think you might need copies of. Keep them in a folder on your computer, or you can keep them in Google Drive. And also make sure you send copies to trusted family and friends just in case you're not able to access yours for any reason. And if you're like me and you end up getting your phone stolen when you're abroad, make sure you have enough money where you can buy a new one. Even if you're not able to buy the same model, maybe something to at least hold you over until you get back home. And I know we spoke about the US Embassy earlier. Make sure you know where the US embassies are in the cities that you're traveling to, because if your passport does get stolen, or your ID or whatever, that's where you're going to want to go to get things sorted out. So you won't be able to have a plan for every single possible thing that might happen while you're on your trip. But I highly recommend having a plan for the most common scenarios, the most common things that could happen. These things that I mentioned either happened to me or I know that they happen to a lot of other people. I'm in a lot of travel groups online and I cannot tell you how many people say that their wallets got stolen. Like it is a very common thing, especially because pickpocketing in Europe is so big. You want to make sure you have a backup plan for those things. Okay, so there you have it. Your complete 10-step process to planning your first solo trip to Europe. I highly recommend following these steps in the exact order that I've laid out because it'll save you so much time, stress, and money. Plus, you'll feel so confident knowing that one, you were able to put all of this stuff together on your own and you can go on your trip knowing that everything is covered and you don't have to worry about anything. And you could just be there in the moment, enjoying your time. Because at the end of the day, who wants to go to Europe to stress? Not me. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out and helps me get my content out to people who need this so that they can start experiencing the world. Also, comment below, let me know what you thought of this video, and also let me know what other solo travel videos you want to see content on. And if you're looking for some more solo travel advice from someone who's been there and done that, I got you. Check out this video of all the things I wish someone would have told me before I went on my solo trip. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.